What's up guys? Now this is a build that I've recently been putting together. It is a retro build all wrapped up in a new case with power supply and cooler, so it's kind of one of those reverse sleeper PCs that people build. Internally we've got some pretty decent retro parts and I'm completely building this for fun. There is no recommendation here to do anything like this, particularly now in 2024. The unit though isn't 100% finished, so I thought today we'd actually go through, finish it off, and then we'll see how well it performs. So like many of you out there, I actually do love to play with retro gaming PCs. I think it's fantastic being able to put together something super cheap that is usually still a little bit capable of playing modern games. And this is one that I decided to just put together for fun, really. I had all in brand new InWin parts sent to me from InWin a while ago, and I wanted to put them together as well. So I thought, why not just merge the two concepts? This will give me something in the studio to play around with in the future, particularly to kind of retest against maybe modern games coming out and see how well an old platform like this can actually perform. But it's actually turning out to be a pretty decent looking system. For the platform itself, we are using a previous generation from AMD. It is an AM3 platform, and for the motherboard we have the Gigabyte 990X Gaming G1. We have to thank our Discord member Rugby Gaming for this motherboard because he actually sent it along to us because it's much better than the one that we have in the studio back in inventory, and it actually looks really nice. It's got loads of features including things like NVMe slots, full RAM slots, that kind of stuff. So it's a pretty decent board and it's going to get us gaming reasonably well. Inside this motherboard we do have one of the highest AM3 processors that we could kind of find, really. Rugby Gaming did actually provide us with one, but we've used the one that we currently have, and it is the FX8350, the 8-core processor from AMD that got them a lot of stick back in the day. Either way, it is a pretty decent CPU for this motherboard and it does run really super hot, so that kind of excuses the fact that we've gone and stuck in a 360mm all-in-one cooler here. For RAM we've got 32 gigabytes of Corsair Vengeance that is running in dual channel, and we've got 4 sticks in there, so it's completely unnecessary for a system like this, but I like to fill the sticks in and I had that RAM laying around, so why would we not? Then for storage, because we have access here to an NVMe slot on this motherboard, which is really super cool because I've not seen one this old with that kind of functionality, we do have a Western Digital Black SN750. It's only a 500 gigabyte drive, but it will get this system up and running and we'll get a few games on there and we'll be able to play some stuff. That does kind of cover the old stuff here, so we've kind of wrapped it up in some brand new stuff too, just to make sure that everything goes well with it and it gives it some nice fresh look. And of course, pretty much everything else is from InWin. I want to thank them for sending across all these parts because it gives us opportunity to build these types of systems for you guys. For anybody that's been watching our videos, you will recognize the case. It is the InWin Airforce. This is the one that is DIY, so you have to build it yourself. We actually built it from scratch in a previous video. We'll link it at the end if you guys want to go watch that. It's pretty fun to do, and to be honest, it did really give me those kind of retro vibes because we kind of don't have any of the modern features here. There's no kind of bottom shroud here to cover anything. You've got an exposed power supply and cables. Kind of makes cable management really hard, but still it's pretty cool to build. It is a very big case and it's really hard to actually get on camera, but it's got everything that we need and I think it looks really good. For the case fans, we do have some ARGB InWin fans. They actually came with the case. I do believe they are the 120mm Luma. They're not terrible and they do kind of come with some weird proprietary connections, but they do have adapters in there so you can adapt it out to proper things and they work perfectly fine and they're nice and quiet too. For the power supply, we do have one of InWin's P series. It is the P1050. That's 1050 watt power supply. That is much needed for a system like this because the CPU is pretty kind of power hungry and so is the graphics card, and we'll introduce you to that in a minute. It's a very nice unit. It's fully modular, it's gold rated, it's going to get the job done, and I'm glad that they sent that across because it really gives us opportunity to kind of test some really high-end stuff out in the future. For the cooler though, we did go for something a little bit wacky, and I think it kind of really does go into the theme here. It is a 360mm all-in-one cooler from InWin again, and it is the NR36. The thing that really kind of stands out for this cooler more than anything else is the cooling unit itself in here. It is in the shape of like, I think they call it the sky, so it's stars, but I think it looks a bit like a disco ball, and that's pretty retro, so that looks pretty cool on this system, and it really does kind of build a highlight in it for theming, really. that is a pretty cool system, and it's going to keep that CPU very, very cool itself. Now, as far as building this system has gone, everything is pretty much in there. The cable management is very questionable. I kind of just rammed on the back there. We have had to include things like SATA connections to power the ARGB controller, because of course this motherboard was never built with one. You don't get them back then. So there is that, and there's a lot of cables in there that are not used, but you kind of have to bundle them up anyway. The back does go on, and because it's got tinted glass, you can't really see much, so it's not too bad. And I'm sure at some point I'll go through and clean that up properly. But I've also left in the hard drive caddy because I think it kind of goes with the retro aesthetics. But these are for the power supply and the graphics card. I'm not sure how well I'm going to be able to hide them once we put the graphics card in, but everything else is kind of bundled up very nicely. When it comes to the graphics card, of course, staying retro, we're going to go for something like this. Now, this is our AMD Radeon R9 398 Gigabyte. We have previously tested this in the past, but not against a system that is kind of more in tune with when this would have actually been released. I think this card looks absolutely fantastic. It is an MSI design, and the red aesthetics are going to go really nice with the Gigabyte board. It's a shame that Gigabyte didn't really create red aesthetic cards back then, or at least that we didn't have one, but it is a pretty decent graphics card. It is very power hungry as well, just like the CPU, so it's a good job that we've got a nice 1000-watt power supply in there, but it runs reasonably cool, and to be honest, it still plays quite a few modern games, and I'm sure once we actually get it installed and things, we're going to take a look at that too. Now, I'm pretty sure that you guys don't really need a lesson on how to install a graphics card. All we need to do is take the graphics card itself. We've already removed the little panels here, and we just need to insert it into this slot. I think this case is a little bit weird when you come to do things like this, because we built it manually and things don't always 100% align, but that should actually now be inserted into the system. Of course, we need to add these cables in too. I'm not sure how well it's going to look, but we need to click them together and kind of get it into that slot. Be really careful when you do this kind of stuff, because you don't want to push too far or too hard down on your card. So I'm going to put my hand underneath, and we're going to click that in just like that. And then it also requires a nice little 6-pin, so we'll flip that one around too, and we'll stick it into there. Now those have actually clicked in. We could do with a nice little cable tie here or something. I'll do that in a minute, but we do also need to make sure that we secure the card in, and for that we're going to be just using some standard screws. There's no fancy thumbless things or thumb screws or anything in this one. So we'll just screw that card down just like that. Now with the card installed, I hope you can see the kind of aesthetics that we were going for here. Unfortunately, this card does have a little bit of GPU sag, which is not great. It doesn't look very nice, but I did measure it up, and I think we could get a little stand if we just move those cables there. I think we can get a little stand in here just to kind of push it up a little bit. We might put that in later on, and of course we need to kind of tie these cables down, but none of that's important really for giving it a bit of a test. Let's get this onto the bench and kind of see what kind of things we can play on it really. Okay, so we've got the system up and running, and it actually installed beautifully fine. We've got some games installed and things like that. One of the issues we did have with the system though is with the amount of fans in here, it is really loud. And even if you go to the BIOS, it's very limited on what you can actually do. There's no real kind of fan curve configuration you can do. It's very simply silent, loud, full, that kind of thing. And even on silent, it wasn't really paying attention to the fans, so it was really, really loud. So instead, what I've done is I've installed the latest version of Fan Control. This is a pretty cool piece of software for any of you out there that does have an older system like this and you want to really configure your fans correctly. Very easy to install, very small to install. It will then auto detect all of the ports and headers on your motherboard, and then it will actually kind of test all of the fans too to see what kind of their minimum maximum speeds are. And then you can literally configure anything that you want. You can even configure the fans on your graphics card if you want to. I've just set up a few small little configurations here just to kind of bring the speeds and noise level down a little bit. Although, again, with a little bit of testing, it seemed perfectly fine. I'm hoping that the cooler itself will keep that CPU very nice and cold while we play some games, particularly with those low speeds. But so far, everything is pretty good. Definitely worth going to check out that piece of software if you haven't before. I've used it regularly in the past, particularly when we're testing coolers and things. It just kind of gives you everything in Windows that you need, and it's pretty cool. So just go check it out. Anyway, if we just drop that down, we've got our MSI Afterburner running, and I've also set a nice little desktop there to Doom Eternal. To test this system, there isn't really that much of in terms of modern games or super modern games that you should really test on something like this. Of course, it's not going to play things like Alan Wake 2, so don't even bother trying. Well, it may start the game. Actually, I don't think it will start the game, just purely because the graphics card's too old more than anything. But this graphics card is still quite capable, and as you can see, it does look fantastic in this system. So instead, I thought what we'd do is just test a couple of games that I kind of really want to revisit recently. Some games that will run generally easy on stuff, not so easy in others, and it's just something that I want to replay at some point, and I think this system will be a great opportunity to be able to do that. And the first game that we're going to test is, of course, Doom Eternal. Now, Doom Eternal came out probably about 2 to 3 years after all this hardware came out. It should run perfectly fine, and particularly this kind of system now makes for a good 1080p system for those who just want to play that type of game. So we'll stick to 1080p and we'll see how well the game does. Now, while our game is loading up, it's also worth noting this system is pretty quick in Windows. It's much faster than I originally thought it was going to be. I thought we were going to get huge delays on things and stuff like that, but we don't actually. It seems to cope perfectly well. We are running Windows 10 as well, so it's going to give it its best chance. But the game is loaded up now and we are locked to a 60 FPS at the moment in the menu. We will head over to the settings once we start the game and we'll see what kind of things we've got configured. I think we're just going to aim for 60 FPS 1080p with whatever we test today, and I may lock that down with VSync because sometimes these older systems will actually create quite a lot of screen tearing and it kind of really takes away from the game. But let's just start a quick game and we'll see what we can get running. Now, Doom Eternal is a very well optimized game. It always has been, and it is one of my favorites from probably the last 5 or 6 years. It kind of gets into that top 10 list purely because the game is great and it runs so well on pretty much any hardware. We did see a little bit of a blip there as we kind of went around the corner. I think we're going to have to get used to that a little bit, but we'll head over to the settings and see what we've got configured. Under our video settings here, we are running in 1080p native, so there's no help from anything like FSR or anything. I don't even think it's actually available in this game, to be honest, but we'll see as we go through. We'll carry on down and we are running in a high preset. That seems to be working reasonably well in game, so we'll go back. We do also have vertical sync enabled, so we'll leave that on. We're not going to see what kind of maximum FPS we get today with this game. We're just going to see if we can kind of hit that 60 more than anything and hit it smoothly, let's say. So let's go back into the game, reset some stats. We are currently getting an average. Oh, it just dropped there as we walked into that explosion. I imagine once we get some enemies on the screen, things are going to get a little bit interesting, but we're currently getting an average of 60 FPS with a 1% low of 58. Lots of things happening underneath us, but those stats are pretty static at the moment. We'll jump down, start killing some stuff, see what's going on. We'll just stamp on that guy there, shoot some guys over there. So far we have had the 1% low drop down to 30 FPS. The game is still more than playable with that kind of FPS. It's jumped back up again now to 58, so it's not too bad. I suspect a lot of our little blipping here is probably going to be from that CPU because they are showing their age nowadays, these FX chips, but it just goes to show that you can completely play games like this. It did have a bit of a stutter there when it was, I'm not sure whether it's trying to load something, but the graphics card is now running at 100%, dropping down to 85, down to 50. I think that's one of the things that you tend to find with older systems like this is things don't seem as stable as they should be. Realistically, we should be seeing like a 99% utilization on the graphics card continually, but it doesn't really take that much away from the game. Not much stuttering going on at the moment. We are going into the next piece of this and I think it kind of looks pretty fine. I do wonder though what our maximum FPS is at the moment. Of course, clearly this game is playable with these settings, so let's head over back to the settings. We'll go to video. Of course, having the 8GB R9 390 does mean that we're not going to run out of VRAM on this because Doom Eternal's a little bit funny with the VRAM. It gives you lots of warnings, and if you try to go over that warning, it just won't let you start the game. So it's really nice to have, even in an older card like this. We'll head down here. We'll turn vertical sync off. I suspect we are going to get a lot of screen tearing on this, but we'll see what the maximum comes out as anyway. Now, with those settings applied, as we can see, we're currently now getting an average of 86, 87, 88, about 90 FPS, depends where we are in the game. Without many enemies around you, kind of get quite a high FPS experience here, but as we kind of go up here, it's starting to drop again a little bit. So if you can get nearly 100 FPS in this game, and our 1% lows have increased quite a bit now, we're running at 68 FPS on our 1% low, so the game is getting smoother. It is a little bit of a shame that vertical sync is kind of ruining the experience a little bit, but I don't actually see that much in terms of screen tearing either. Everything seems to be perfectly fine, so you could probably get away with running this without vertical sync on and get a near high FPS experience. The system is starting to warm up now. Of course, that's going to happen if you are not limiting the game at all. Our GPU is now maxing out at 100%. That's exactly what we wanted before. So all in all, I think the system is coping pretty well. And the CPU, to be honest, is kind of not really being utilized that much. It's got a little bit more left in it, particularly with this graphics card. So if you did install a higher rated graphics card, I don't think you can get much higher in terms of when that was actually made, but if you went a few generations newer, you could probably get away with that on that CPU too. This is actually really fun to see. I really do love this game. One of my favorites of the last 6 years or so, as I said, and I'm definitely going to replay it on this system just because it's fun more than anything. But let's try a different game, something a little bit more newer, or much newer, and another one of those games that is in my top 10 list of the last 6 years, and we'll see how well that one performs as well. So the next game is Dead Island 2. I waited about 11 or 13, something like that, years for this game to come out. I was a big fan of Dead Island 1. I played it for hours and hours way back then on a console, pretty much as it came out. And I played it again later on the PC just because you get the heightened experience, and I thought it was brilliant. So I waited and I waited and I waited for Dead Island 2 to come out. It eventually came out and it was actually quite well optimized. It is a very large game, but you could get away with playing it on some reasonably low-end hardware, particularly at the time. The one thing that you will notice with a system like this though, because of that old CPU, is if we hit continue on this, it's going to start compiling shaders, and that's when things start to get a little bit slow. My home system with a 14900K in it will actually whiz through this in a couple of seconds. It just goes whoop and it's done, whereas this one takes a few seconds to get through it. Now, it doesn't really affect the game that much on something like this, but if you were to install something like The Last of Us Part 1, you'll sit there for about 5 or 6 minutes waiting for the shaders to compile. I do remember testing the CPU with that game, and it just took forever for that to actually happen. I don't know why that game's very different to this one when it comes to shader compilation, but it seems to be. And again, it's got better as the game has been updated, and the 14900K kind of just whizzes through it, but this kind of system still doesn't really. So be aware of that if you are going to build a system with an old CPU, particularly if you're going to use it for retro purposes, but now and again play a modern game too. What we'll do is we'll head straight into wherever we saved the game last, and we'll see if we can get a 60 FPS experience. If we can, even maybe if we have to tweak some of the settings, I think that's a great success for a little retro system like this. So we have spawned into the game where my last save file was. I'm not sure, I don't think this is actually that far through the game, because Epic was a little bit weird for a while and it didn't actually transfer your save file from one system to another. So I had to start again when we were benchmarking compared to when I play at home. But apart from that, it seems to be running okay at the moment. The game does look glorious. There's absolutely no issues here. I'm not sure what settings we're in. Graphics cards running at 100%. We expect that. CPU's running about the same at around 50-60%. And if you actually take a look, the CPU is staying very cool with this 360mm all-in-one cooler at around 30 degrees. That is actually pretty crazy, because in the room at the moment, it's actually pretty warm. So this cooler is doing a fantastic job, and the GPU is around 71 degrees, which is about normal for this kind of thing. But anyway, let's head into the settings and see what we've got configured. Now, this game will give us access to FSR, I believe, so we may need or may want to use that at some point if we want to smoothen something out. But at the moment, we are running in 1080p. We don't have any VSync on. There's no maximum frame rate. If we pop over to the advanced settings, we can see we're in a high. Now, while we were in the game, we were getting kind of high 40s, so I'm going to turn that down a little bit. If I remember correctly, turning the settings from high to medium in this doesn't really change the quality that much. I think you get slightly less blur on shadows and things, but you don't notice when you're getting killed by zombies and you're running around like an idiot. So we'll head back into game, we'll save that, and we'll see what we currently get. Now, the average FPS has increased by quite a bit now. We're getting an average of around 65 FPS, and it seems to be pretty stable with a 1% low of 50. There isn't much happening on the screen at the moment. We had a big jump there where the system kind of, I don't know whether it was loading something, but our 1% lows went down and we had a bit of a stutter. We'll see if we can clear that up if it continues, but so far everything seems to be running perfectly fine. The system is starting to warm up a bit now. We're getting 37 degrees on that CPU, so it's clearly using it. Yeah, we've found a zombie. Let's give it a punch. So even with things on the screen, we're getting a little bit of jitter now on our frame time graph, but it's not translating into the game. Everything still seems pretty smooth. I don't even know if I've got any weapons, but we'll kill that guy first, and then we'll run to somewhere with a bit of safety for a minute while we tweak our settings a little bit. One of the things to note in this game as well is that even on the high-end systems that I've tested or modern systems, the 1% lows always seem to be about half of your average FPS. Doesn't mean it's a terrible experience half the time, because they're usually pretty decent and the game is quite well optimized anyway for high averages. But I don't know what that is. Maybe it is a problem with the engine or the game or something like that. But either way, this is getting about average to what those systems do. We're currently getting an average now of 39 frames per second on the 1% low, with an average FPS of 64. So it's about equal. Let's head back into the settings, see if we can tweak some more things. One thing I will do is I'm going to turn on VSync. We'll see if we can lock it to that 60 and see if that can help smooth things down, particularly with allowing the system to not put too much pressure on that graphics card. We'll go back over to the advanced. We are running in a medium setting. One of the things that I will have a look at is the FX super resolution, so AMD's FSR. We'll see if we can turn that on. We'll turn it on to quality. Try to keep as much of the fidelity there as we can, and we'll see how well it performs with that. So let's go back, save our changes, and get back into that game. Now we are getting a very consistent 60 FPS on average here, and our 1% lows have increased a little bit. It's actually quite good, to be honest, although it's just dropped down now to 36, 32. The game actually feels like it's got a little bit more delay in it, which is pretty crazy really, because all we've done is really just turn the settings down. I'm wondering if that FSR is maybe causing us an issue, because this card isn't officially supported by FSR. So let's just drop back into settings. We'll disable that FSR and see if we can just go with a native resolution and no upscaling or anything like that, and see if we can at least just get it completely playable. FSR is disabled. Again, we're getting about the same averages here, although our 1% lows dropped to 24. Still reasonably smooth, no major jumps in the game. We've got some zombies here, we'll punch them. Everything seems to be running smooth. I can't really see much of an issue. We'll try and find a place where there's more zombies. We are currently getting an average of 59 frames per second with a 1% low of 34. We've now found a place with lots more zombies. We'll get them chasing us. We've got some electricity on the go. Nothing is going majorly wrong. That one just punched me. I'm going to punch it back. Oh no, I punched its friend. Anyway, we'll run down here. I'm pretty sure a few zombies do spawn here, but if you haven't played this game, you should definitely go check it out as well, because it is fantastic. It is a very big game. It's quite long, although you can complete it very quickly if you just rush through the main story. There's lots and lots of side quests to do, and if you're into your zombie style games like I am, it's definitely a must play. But we are getting a bit of jittering on the old frame time graph there. It's not translating too much into the game, to be honest, but I can definitely feel it as turning, particularly when there's lots on the screen. But I think you could get away with playing this. Most people, if they really did want to play this, could restrict it down to just a 30 FPS experience like a games console, and you're gonna have a great time with it, because the game really doesn't want you paying attention to too much around. Apart from that, the system will play the game. I've found that the best settings really is a native medium setting on the preset and just play the game. You will get the odd stutter here and there when there's lots and lots of things on the screen, but it's still more than playable. You can still get away with it. Now, I'm going to keep this system around for a while because I actually love the look of it, and maybe we'll put it back out again, test some even more modern games. I do want to pick up Space Marine 2, so maybe we'll give that a bit of a test on this at some point. You won't want to miss that, so don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Let me know what you think in the comments about this system. Do you have a retro system too? I like to build them because they're super cheap to do, particularly if one of your Discord members give you a motherboard, and you can have some real fun with it just to see what kind of things it does. And of course, this is now, I don't know, about 7 or 8 years old at least, and it still plays these kind of games. That's amazing. But anyway, I'm going to continue on playing with this system. I'm going to try and install some more games, see how far we get, maybe just install some retro games as well and replay them too. But until the next time, I'll catch you guys in the next one.